What's going on, guys? Welcome back to hashtag AskGSM here today for April 19th, 2017, episode 177 here today. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, where every single Wednesday I answer your questions from Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube right here on hashtag AskGSM. You can send in your questions by tweeting me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with hashtag AskGSM. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/graham.gsm.matthews. Leave a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not the wall itself. And last but not least, leave a comment on this very video in the comment section down below. I'll be sure to include your question in next week's edition. So without further ado, let's get started here. Prince5835, their question was, first of a couple questions. With the superstar shakeup now settled in, do you think we'll see some superstars stay on one brand for an extended period of time? For example, Rey Mysterio was a mainstay on SmackDown from 2002 to 2008 before going to Raw for the first time. I would hope so. I really like when they do stuff like that. Like Undertaker was a great example, a guy that in the brand split from 2002 to 2011, 2012, whenever they kind of pseudo-ended it, he never went to Raw. I mean, he was on Raw when they first did the draft back in 2002, but they moved him to SmackDown shortly thereafterward, and he never moved back. He was a SmackDown mainstay for well over a decade, a lot like Rey Mysterio for those 6 years. And even when he did get drafted to Raw, he went back to SmackDown the very next year. His Raw run was kind of uneventful. And then they moved him back to Raw in 2011. By that point, it didn't even really fucking matter. People were moving back and forth for no real rhyme or reason anyway, so it didn't even really matter. But, I mean, like an AJ Styles, I think would be a great example of a guy that, I know, like, the longer they keep him on SmackDown, the bigger the deal the bigger deal it's going to be when he moves to Raw, like down the road, which you know is going to happen. I'm really, really happy they didn't do it this year, but if they wait until next year or the year after that, it's like, wow, AJ Styles on Raw is going to be a big fucking deal. I remember when Rey Mysterio went to Raw, I had just started watching wrestling, and seeing him on Raw, I mean, I didn't really understand the full, scope of that at the time just because I had not been watching for very long, but thinking back on it, that was a pretty big deal, and he was also coming back from injury that night, too. He had been injured since right before WrestleMania, so for him to return on Raw at the draft for the first time in 6 years, he's a member of Monday Night Raw, was a big fucking deal. So I really do hope they kind of do more of that stuff in the future with guys like AJ Styles, like Alexa Bliss. I don't think people really understand that when she debuted last week, of course she got a big pop because people, she's a popular fixture now in the women's division of both Raw and SmackDown. But prior to that point, Alexa Bliss had never appeared even once on Monday Night Raw. She debuted in the WWE draft and went to SmackDown immediately. She never went to Raw. She never wrestled a single match on Raw. She never even appeared on Raw. So when she showed up last week, by way of the Superstar Draft, it was a pretty big deal. So I would like to see more of that stuff in the future. His second question, besides the people that were called up from NXT, did the superstars that switched shows feel random and uneventful? Just look at the pop that John Cena got when he was drafted to Raw in 2005. That was a bit different. The superstar shakeup, I talked about it more in depth last week in articles here on the show and whatnot. I liked the results. I liked, by and large, a lot of the people who moved where. I like a lot of the people that went to SmackDown. Rusev, big get for SmackDown. Owens, Zayn, I think were great on SmackDown. Miz, not so much. Ambrose on Raw, I'm in full favor of. Wyatt, whatever. Cruz, Kalisto, I like. Alexa Bliss on Raw, I like a lot. So I liked a lot of the moves. The way they did it, I was not a big fan of. Yes, in 2005, they kind of had something similar where people were showing up at random times on Raw and SmackDown, switching shows. But that was different because it was a lottery. They pretty much clearly established that it was randomized. And even that I'm not the biggest fan of. If they did trades, I get that. But they didn't really disclose who they traded for who this past week in the Superstar Shakeup. It seemed like people were showing up at random on Raw and SmackDown just because they felt like it. Like, it really made no sense. But at any rate, yeah, like you said, when Cena came to Raw in 2005, that's kind of a different example, kind of a different case just because, for one thing, he was the WWE champion at that time. And prior to that point, the WWE title had not been on Raw in almost 3 years. So it was a pretty big fucking deal when he showed up. They made a big deal about the first person changing shows, like he was the first person to show up on Raw in the WWE draft that year. Cena, up to that point, had never been on Raw in the 3 years that he had been in WWE. So again, different circumstances, but yeah, I wish they would kind of handle it differently. And Jericho was hyping it up too, like the first member of Monday Night's Raws, and the first acquisition for Monday Night Raw in the WWE draft is, but you know what I mean? Like they played it up as a big deal. at the start of Raw last week, the show started and Dean Ambrose shows up for like no real reason. He's like, Cena and Nick here, rather Miz and Maurice. They were like, oh, we're on Raw now. Like, but why? Like, were you traded? Did you just want to come to Raw? Like, what's the deal here? His third question: what do you think of Seth Rollins' new finisher? So, a video leaked last week. I saw it on NoDQ.com. I'm sure you could find it elsewhere. There really has not been too much talk about it since then because Rollins has not yet wrestled on TV. And when he did wrestle at Mania, he used the pedigree. And the Raw the next night in the tag team match, he didn't get the final pin. That was Balor on Kevin Owens. So you've yet to see this on TV. We might see it at Payback, who knows, or maybe even next week. But from what it looks like, Seth Rollins' new finisher is him. It's like the Rainmaker, Okada's Rainmaker, but instead of hitting an elbow, it's a knee to the face. And RJ pointed out when I texted him last week that it's the same knee that broke Cena's nose. Like the same. He does it as a regular move now anyway. As a finisher, it might be hard to take seriously just because we've seen him do it so many times as a regular move. I think before, he was on Jericho's podcast about a year ago talking about what new finishers he might use after the pedigree, or, besides the pedigree, once the curb stomp was banned, which was the perfect finisher, and hopefully they bring it back at some point, even for a one-off. But they were talking about new potential finishers for him, and he thought about using the knee off the top rope, about using the mule kick or the super kick or whatever. And again, those are moves he's already doing in his regular moveset, so to think that would take someone out when it hasn't for the past 4 or 5 years is kind of silly. I actually don't really mind the move. Again, people will romanticize about Okada's Rainmaker. Oh my God, what a great finisher. People, it's a fucking clothesline. It's a clothesline. So if he can put away people with clotheslines, I know that's New Japan Pro Wrestling. It's a completely different wrestling scene over there. But if Okada could put away people with a clothesline, a simple clothesline, then why not Rollins with the knee? I mean, the knees are the most dangerous part of his arsenal, from what it seems. Again, it broke John Cena's nose. So, legitimately. I mean, I don't really have a big issue with it at all. I don't think it's a terrible finisher. Yeah, could he have a better finisher? Sure. Something flashier, but the setup, I think, is cool. I think it's kind of an ode to Okada, I'm sure. I'm sure Rollins did that on purpose. I don't have that big of a problem with it. I'm sure people do. I saw people calling it shit. That's whatever. I really could honestly care less. Next one, I mean, he can't do the pedigree forever, people. He can't do that forever. I mean, he makes it look pretty good, better than Triple H most times, but he can't do it forever. Next question, how come we haven't heard the theme songs of Raw and SmackDown in what seems like forever? I mean, you hear them in, like, the bumpers and shit like that, but, you mean if you're talking about, like, the opening sequences, like the intros for the shows? For SmackDown, I don't think we've seen the SmackDown intro in a while. I will agree with that. The Raw one we saw just last week, I'm pretty sure. I remember seeing it before the Superstar Shakeup and thinking this will be outdated in like a minute when the new Superstars, switch shows and whatnot. So I was kind of, I kind of figured that. But yeah, we just saw the Raw one last week. They should air it every week, like a television show more often than not a TV show. Airs their intro every single week. So other than certain circumstances, special circumstances, I think if you want to brand yourself as a television show, or we're the longest running television show on cable television, whatever, of all time, then air the fucking intro every week. It's a small thing, but it makes a big difference to kind of introduce people to the show, get ready for Raw. I like the Raw theme a lot better than the SmackDown one. The SmackDown one's good too, but I wish they would show the intro more often. I do agree. Next question from Amanda450 Splash, also from YouTube. Their question was, do you think that the NXT TakeOver specials should be saved for the Big Four pay-per-views? I mean, they kind of already are to begin with. I mean, we only really have 4 a year. I think last year we only had the Big Four ones. Or no, we didn't. We had Dallas, which was WrestleMania, The End, which was just a random one in June, SummerSlam, and then the one in November. So we kind of did have them around the Big Four. This year we had the Rumble one in San Antonio. I'm sorry, last year was Toronto. This year, San Antonio was over Rumble weekend. We had the one in Orlando over WrestleMania weekend. I know we have one coming up in Chicago in May, next month. I think the same weekend as Backlash. But other than that, I'm pretty sure the next one after that is the one at SummerSlam. And then the one in Texas again, in Dallas or wherever, for Survivor Series weekend. So, again, doesn't really surprise me. I'm pretty sure Survivor Series is in Texas or something, the same state as the Rumble from what I can recall. I'm pretty sure it's in Dallas, but I mean, I think it doesn't really matter. It's not like they're doing one every month. Now, that would be overkill. That would be a problem, but they're not doing that. They're doing one every 3 or 4 months, and then just an occasional one in the spring. Like last year, we had one in June, and this year we have one in May. Just a nice little buffer in between the ones. That's like a 4 or 5 month difference between WrestleMania and SummerSlam. I mean, they have done it before. There was a big 4-month gap in between takeovers from TakeOver London in December 2015 and the one they did over WrestleMania weekend in 2016 in April. So they've done it before, but it would be nice if we had one every 2 or 2.5 or so months. And we're getting that in May of this year, so I really don't have a problem with that at all. They're kind of doing that already anyway. And their second question, who/what inspired you to start writing about wrestling? Good question. I've always been a writer. I've always loved to write, dating back to, kindergarten, soon after that. Like, ever since, it's for as long as I can remember, I have always loved to write. Maybe not about wrestling. I didn't start liking wrestling. I didn't become an official fan of WWE until 9 years ago from this past Friday. But even before that, I was writing about pretty much anything I was interested in, whether it was Monk or Psych, the TV shows that used to air on the USA Network that I fucking loved. Those shows were great. Whether it was Walker, Texas Ranger, or anything Disney related, which I've talked about here on the show before. I've always loved to write, and I've always been a big believer about combining anything you're passionate about, and if they can kind of mesh. Writing and wrestling to me just kind of came together perfectly. And I started writing officially for Bleacher Report in May of 2010, so almost 7 years ago, which is crazy to think about at this point. But I was writing about wrestling even before then, because even right after I started watching almost 9 years ago, definitely over 9 years ago at this point, I was writing about stuff that my younger brother Jackson and I were doing, like just fantasy wrestling, like an E-Federation, EJM, Next Day Wrestling, which is where that originated from, which is where that name started. What kind of started out as was just a fantasy wrestling organization that we did together. And I would write about that, or I would write about stuff about WWE on their Facebook-like platform called the WWE Universe, which is no more. They got rid of it about 5-6 years ago with the rise of Facebook. It's kind of a failure, but I was into it. So yeah, I've been writing about wrestling ever since I pretty much started watching 9 years ago. But why I started to do it just because I always loved to write, so I figured I would write about something I'm passionate about, and look where it's gotten me. So very thankful for that. Next question, Emmanuel A. from YouTube. How do you feel about the word edgy? Like, what does edgy content mean to you? And are you instantly more interested in them than you would be if not edgy stuff? Do you think wrestling should automatically lend itself to being edgy, even if it's stuff like Val Venus nearly having his dick chopped off by a Japanese stable, or Shawn Michaels and Triple H making multiple cock jokes against their boss, even when one of them is supposed to be a born-again Christian in his 40s? So I don't know if you're being... I'm not sure if you're being sarcastic on purpose. I'm not an edgy content guy. First of all, when you say the word edgy, I think of my roommate who is huge into memes and all that other shit, online stuff. And I say shit. I don't mean that as if it's garbage. I'm just saying that as if it's stuff, because I'm into half of it too. I mean, he's really kind of gotten me ingrained, so to speak, into the meme culture and all that other shit posting, quote unquote stuff. But anyway, so that's the first thing I think of when you say edgy, because he uses that word all the time to describe stuff that he's into. He's a big Venom guy. I know there's a new comic out today from what he said. He said that's edgy, stuff like that. Disturbed, a band, the old artist for Stone Cold Steve Austin's 2001 theme song, he calls them edgy. Anyway, so in regards to wrestling, no, I mean, when you put edgy and wrestling together, I think of the Attitude Era, which, again, as I've talked about time and time again, I wasn't a fan of. I mean, I wasn't a fan at that time. I wasn't watching wrestling at that time, but if I had a choice to watch a pay-per-view from like the modern day, from the last 10 years, or the Ruthless Aggression era, or even from the 80s or the Attitude Era, I would choose pretty much anything else but the Attitude Era, because I'm just not a fan of the wrestling. A lot of the storylines they were doing, people romanticize about the Attitude Era all the time, but it was always fucking Vince on the show. I mean, I know it was fresh at that time to have an evil authority figure, a heel authority figure, but it got old after a while, and you watch the pay-per-views. I was watching one of the In Your House's pay-per-views, one of the In Your House shows a couple of weeks ago, and you had Goldust come out making like gay overtones, which I know his character, that's the whole crux of his character was being gay. But that being said, I mean, they were just being way over the top with it. With the Luna Vachon shit in like late 90s, it was just pure garbage. And people were paying for this stuff on pay-per-view. So again, it wasn't even entertaining. So when I think of edgy, I'm more, just because I hear the word edgy in wrestling doesn't mean I'm more interested in it. I think more often than not, it's just edgy for the sake of being edgy, for the sake of being controversial, for the sake of being polarizing, just to get people talking. I'm not really all that interested in that kind of stuff. Brandon A. back with another long-form question in regards to WrestleMania, his non-popular opinions, as we talked about last week. His question this week was, I recognize the show, WrestleMania, is long, but isn't it only an extra hour longer than it used to be? Why does everyone act like it jumped from 4 hours to 7 hours? All the previous WrestleManias had pre-shows too, whether they were dark matches or Sunday Night Heat or on the network now. And most of the first hour on the pre-show is just talking anyway, which can be skipped. The rosters are also so much bigger now. Let's just say we got everything we've been asking for when it came to WrestleMania. 1, more one-on-one matches or traditional tag team matches, less multi-person matches. 2, less part-timers. 3, more time and spotlight given to the undercard matches, for instance, Aries versus Neville. And 4, less matches overall. If this happened, there would be still several big names left off the card, including many internet darlings. What the heck would TV be like on Raw and SmackDown if all those wrestlers weren't going to be working at WrestleMania? Say, for instance, we had AJ, Owens, Seth Rollins, Samoa Joe, Braun Strowman, Roman Reigns, Miz, Cena, etc. on the card, but we don't have Sami Zayn, Dolph Ziggler, Baron Corbin, Dean Ambrose, American Alpha, etc. on the card. What the heck are these people supposed to do on TV from January to April if their storylines won't play out at WrestleMania? This is another reason for me to believe the card, just by default, has to be longer now. What are your thoughts? Thanks for answering. I know it's long and I feel the need to just make sure I give proper context for my differing opinion. That is a great question. And again, I've said this before, WrestleMania is too fucking long. I know you want to get everyone on the card, and there's going to be a lot of people left out the card, but you know what? Tough shit. And people would be complaining, but you know what? People are going to complain no matter what. You can have a 4-hour WrestleMania. You cannot please everyone. There is no perfect scenario here. I know what you're saying. I would probably complain too, but everyone's going to fucking complain. If you have a 4-hour show, a standard 4-hour WrestleMania from 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern to 11 o'clock p.m. Eastern, with a lot of people left off the show, well, you know what? Tough shit. You know what? Tough shit. They're not in a marquee match, then they're not in a marquee match. At least the show is shorter. You can't have a 7-hour show. That's ridiculous. You can't have a 7-hour anything. What? Point me to one thing that people can sit down and watch for 7 hours nonstop. That is just ridiculous. In the first hour, the pre-show, you had to watch the whole thing because they had the Cruiserweight Championship match in the first half hour of the show. So you have to be sitting down watching, waiting for the matches to happen because you don't know when they're going to happen. I had to rush my fucking seats at 5:30 at WrestleMania Sunday because I heard Aries' music. I'm like, fuck, I thought this was happening at 6. So I rushed my seat just to see the rest of the match, and thank God I got there in time. But that's just way too fucking long. For a show to end at midnight is ridiculous. Like, I know what you're saying, but you cannot have a 7-hour show. So to answer your other question, what do these people do in the meantime? Look at Sami Zayn and Samoa Joe. They were still having their feud, and it was pretty damn good, and they would have matches on TV. It makes the TVs leading up to WrestleMania that much more must-see. If these people aren't facing off on TV heading into WrestleMania, look at American Alpha and the Usos. They didn't have a match at WrestleMania, not against each other, in a standard 2-on-2 tag team title match, but they had a great fucking match on SmackDown a couple of weeks before the pay-per-view. So they don't have to have a match at WrestleMania. Yeah, did it kind of suck? Yeah, sure. But again, tough shit. Not everyone can be at WrestleMania. Yeah, the rosters are so much bigger now, and I'm sure that a large reason why the card was so big this year was because of the brand split. I'm a big fan of the brand split. So, I mean, it would be hypocritical for me to say that we should not have bigger cards. You can have bigger cards. I think this year was a great card because a lot of the matches meant something, and they were all culminations of multi-month feuds, and a lot of the big names were on the cards. Yeah, no Samoa Joe on the card. That kind of sucked, but that's one big name. I mean, if in this scenario that I'm pitching here for a shorter show, a lot of people would be left off the show. That's why you have just the one big battle royal. I'm not saying you have no multi-man matches, but you just have one big battle royal. I'm sorry about the women, but you can't get all the women on the show. That's just the way it fucking is. I'm sorry. You have one standard singles match, which we've not had at WrestleMania in 11 years since WrestleMania 22, a standard one-on-one title match at WrestleMania. That wasn't a fucking gimmick match, and that was 11 years ago. But you have one big battle royal. You put all the rest of the big names that aren't on the actual card in the battle royal. It can be on the main card if you want, but that's it. You throw, I'm sorry Strowman didn't have a match at WrestleMania, but again, tough shit. What are you going to do? Everyone else is booked. You have so much star power nowadays. There's not much else you could do. So you put all those people in the battle royal as opposed to the Bo Dallases and the Curtis Axels, the people that, the superstars that people don't give a shit about anyway. You take them out. You put in the bigger stars that don't have a match at WrestleMania, and there you go. That's the way that I would do it anyway. Again, you can't please everyone, but that's best case scenario, and just kind of preventing from having another 7-hour marathon of a show. I loved WrestleMania. Even being there live, I heard people saying they were tired, they were exhausted, which makes sense. I was all amped up, but watching from home, I probably would have been dead within the first 4 hours, because that's a lot of fucking wrestling when you consider everything else that happens over WrestleMania weekend. Next question from Andre G from Facebook. What feud do you think will end up being the better at the end of their careers? Dean Ambrose versus Seth Rollins or Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens? That's a great question. I love both feuds a lot. If I had to choose, I know Ambrose and Rollins has been more prominently featured because it's been over a world championship a couple of times in the last few years. That said, I thought the matches that Zayn and Owens had were better. The early matches in NXT weren't great. They told a better story than they were great matches. But the matches they've had on the main roster have been pretty great. The one at Payback last year was awesome. Battleground was one of the matches of the year. And all of their television matches are good to great anyway. They've never had a bad match on TV. And Zayn and Owens very well might end up being over a world championship at some point down the line. Hell, it could be next year's WrestleMania. If Owens wins the WWE Championship, or Sami Zayn, I'm sure Owens would win it first. Zayn wins the Rumble. There's your WWE title match for SmackDown at WrestleMania next year. And I don't think people would bat an eyelash because they have the history. They can go out there and have a great match. So I wouldn't complain. But again, Ambrose and Rollins also have their Shield history, so it's really, really hard to say. But I think with Owens and Zayn, their feud has, translated from show to show, from NXT to Raw, now to SmackDown. And then even before that, they had their long-ass feud in Ring of Honor for many years. So if I had to choose, probably Owens and Zayn, and they have more personal issues, like the whole I'm a prize fighter thing, why did you turn on me? And of course, Rollins turned on Dean Ambrose in the Shield and Roman Reigns and whatever, but it was a bit different. I feel like, and now that the Shield is back together, you don't see Zayn and Owens reuniting every other week. Like, Rollins and Ambrose and Reigns have reunited a few times on one-off occasions in the last 2 or so years. You don't really have that all that much with Zayn and Owens. They have been on the same team at some points, but by and large, they have been mortal enemies. So if I had to choose, probably Zayn Owens, but I would not argue with you if you went with Ambrose Rollins. Mark S. has got a couple questions here from Facebook. Have you ever seen a double pin in a title match, and what is the result of the matchup in that case? A few different things. I know there was a match, I think in early 2005, where there was a double pin or a double submission or a pin and a submission at the same time. I'm not sure. But it ended up being called a draw, and they vacated the belt to put inside the Elimination Chamber, which Triple H won anyway, despite being the champion in the first place before the belt was vacated. So that was a complete waste of time. Just an excuse to hold the chamber match. But yeah, so I've seen that happen where the match is just called a draw, and they vacate the belt, or they just restart the match. I know it wasn't a double pin, it was a double submission, but same thing. At SummerSlam 2012, when both Cena and Punk forced Big Show to submit, AJ Lee came out and said the match will be restarted, and then Punk went afterwards. So there's no real set rules. Maybe they talk about it in that book of rules the WWE just put out, but from what I've seen, there's a couple different outcomes. There's no one real set outcome, but I've seen the match restarted. I've seen matches be called the draw. So that's what happened. That's what has happened in the past with championship matches. Ending in a double pin or submission. His second question, could the Perfect 10 concept by Ty Dillinger work as a heel one as well? He was a heel as the Perfect 10. He started out as a heel with the Perfect 10 gimmick for a solid year and a half in NXT before they turned him babyface because he was so fucking popular. I mean, it could work as a heel. I mean, he's calling himself the Perfect 10. That's like the typical narcissist. Sorry for botching my own words there. With Lex Luger back in the day. And now I'm all over the place. And it worked with him for a time before they turned him babyface too. I think it's better right now as a babyface gimmick just because people like him so much. But once it dies down, which you know it has to at some point down the road, whether it be sooner or later, they can turn him heel. They can have him be a dick with it. I know Solid Monster pitched the idea of putting Jerry Lawler with him as his manager, which I think would be a great pairing. You could do that. But yeah, I think it could work as a heel gimmick, but for right now, people just like to chant 10, so if he's going to be over for as long as people like to chant that for the time being. His next question, are there any women outside of WWE you would like to see in the women's tournament? Yeah, Mia Yim. It's so funny that of all the people that TNA did not re-sign a couple of months ago, the Hardys in WWE. Drew McIntyre in WWE. Mike Bennett and Maria, it seems like they're WWE bound, which I'll talk about momentarily. And Mia Yim was the other one. So that being said, it's just funny to think that all the people that TNA did not re-sign seem to be heading, that TNA did not re-sign, they seem to be heading to WWE. And Mia Yim should be no exception. She's been in NXT a few times before for like tryout matches, but she has never been signed to the company. I think she'd be a great asset to NXT's women's division. So Mia Yim, I think, is just a surefire pick in my opinion. Candice LeRae, I'm not too familiar with her work, but I've heard enough about her to know that she's really, really good on the independent scene. Veda Scott from Ring of Honor, she's not tremendous, but she's a great character, and I know she, I think, was in talks to coming into WWE for the tournament a couple of months ago. So yeah, those are three names right there, Mia Yim, Candice LeRae, and Veda Scott. LeRae, I think, is married to Johnny Gargano, so the fact that she has not gotten a look yet by WWE surprises me. His next question, considering the amount of women fans have seen in NXT in their division, would a separate hour-long NXT women's wrestling show be an idea for the WWE Network, or would there be very little interest? No, I think there would be interest in that, but for NXT only, absolutely not. There's not enough women in that division to warrant its own show. I think the tournament is the best possible scenario. I mean, people have pitched the idea of doing an entire show for the women, which is not a bad thing, or putting all the women on one show, but then you know at that point, like, oh, let's put all the women on Raw. Just, you know people are going to get overlooked. If you have one women's division for, I mean, even now, for Raw has had its own women's division for so long. Emma was being overlooked for so fucking long, you know? You can only imagine if they had one women's division on one separate brand, on its own brand, half the roster wouldn't be getting opportunities. It would be Charlotte versus Sasha Banks every single week. It'd be no different. So I don't want to see that happen. I think a women's show, a tournament show, I think is amazing. Doing a show with the women on the main roster, I just don't think it's necessary. I think they get enough time as it is on TV. So whether it be through one or two matches, so it's really not that necessary. I think the cruiserweights already kind of got that down. But the women's wrestling tournament, I think is great. But doing a show only for the NXT women is just, that's a catastrophe. That would be a catastrophe just because they don't have enough women as it is on that show currently, with like 5 or 6 women and only really few of them being established at this point in time. His next question: what was your impression of Tyson Tbone, the guy who fought Wolfgang in the first round, and Danny Burch in the UK Championship Tournament? And would either guy be a nice addition to the new UK program? So thoughts on Tyson Tbone and Danny Burch. Danny Burch was in NXT a couple of years ago for quite a while, maybe from 2012 to 2014, and he still makes appearances to this day. I know they signed a bunch of people from the tournament, like Pete Dunne, Mark Andrews, Wolfgang, I think. Obviously the champion, Tyler Bate. So they've got a couple people, Trent Seven. I don't think they signed either Tyson Tbone or Danny Burch, but I think both guys would be great additions to the show. Tyson Tbone, he got knocked out, I think, by Wolfgang, like you said, in the first round of the tournament, and he was really good. Danny Burch also got knocked out pretty early, too, by Jordan Devlin, I think his name was. He's also pretty good, but I like Danny Burch a lot. He's very old school, reminds me a lot of William Regal. Tyson Tbone, a lot of the same way. Reminds me of William Regal in more ways than one, So I think both guys would be great additions to the show if they sign them. Again, I'm not sure what their status is, but yeah, I was a big fan of both guys in the tournament. Would love to see them in the eventual United Kingdom show on the network. At Jeremy8911, his question was, do you agree that SmackDown is in rebuild mode right now and will slowly start to pick up again? Honestly, I thought the show last night was pretty good. I know I'm SmackDown biased because I love SmackDown. I think it's a better show than Raw, but I mean, Raw's been doing better too. I thought both shows this week were pretty good. I know they're in rebuild mode right now, excuse me. Easy for me to say. I know with like Jinder Mahal, that was the next question, with Jinder Mahal becoming the new number one contender to the WWE Championship. Yeah, they are in a rebuild mode with the absences of Wyatt and Ambrose and Miz, but they kind of filled that in pretty well. I mean, they have Baron Corbin, they have Kevin Owens coming in, Sami Zayn coming in, they have the New Day coming in soon. They already have AJ Styles, they have Shinsuke Nakamura having debuted, Ty Dillinger too. The women seem pretty set, so I would not say they're in rebuild mode right now because the roster is already pretty much stacked. Like, I know they were short on star power in that six-pack challenge last night, but the match was great, and they can make a star overnight. I mean, we'll see how this whole Mahal push, pans out, but for right now, I think they're doing pretty well. The AJ Styles at the helm, they already have Randy Orton. John Cena is out right now, but they'll have him when he comes back in a couple of months. SmackDown's set. I don't really think there's much rebuilding to do. It'll take time to rebuild Jinder Mahal, so that's the next question. Thoughts on Jinder Mahal becoming the new number one contender to the WWE Championship? I mean, I honestly could not care less about Jinder. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm so excited about it. I mean, I like the fact they're giving new opportunities to new people. Jinder Mahal does absolutely nothing for me whatsoever. The guy bores me to fucking tears, but the alliance with the Bollywood boys is slightly intriguing, or the Singh brothers, whatever they're calling them. That's slightly intriguing. We'll see where that goes. I mean, he's getting a lot of heat right now, like legitimate heat, which is awesome. As a wrestler, the guy just absolutely does nothing for me whatsoever, again. So a match with Orton might be fucking boring as shit, especially in Chicago. So we'll see how it pans out. But you know what? On the bright side, they're giving new people opportunities. So that's all the best thing I can say about it. So Mahal could not give two shits about the guy, but we'll see how they handle him in the coming weeks. If they can make him a real threat, then maybe I'll be more optimistic about it. But on the bright side, at least they're pushing new faces. I mean, new, quote-unquote, the guy's been around for 6 years in the main roster, on and off after having released 2 years ago, or 3 years ago at this point. So we'll see how it goes, but at least he's a new face in the main event scene. That's the best thing I can say about it. How far, or that was from @Sean Markistic, his second question, how far do you see Mike Bennett and Maria going in WWE? I love the act. I think, honestly, I know we can all argue that TNA releasing them or not re-signing them when they did. I know there was an option on the table for them to go back, but whatever. Just TNA did not make a big enough offer for them to stay. Now they appear to be WWE bound. But for as much as we can shit on TNA for not re-signing them, you got to give them credit, because Mike Bennett was already a great talent, but in Ring of Honor, he was a standard tag team guy. If he came into WWE this time a year ago, he would have been no more than a lower mid-card guy on the main roster, but it seems like he's headed straight to the main roster on SmackDown Live, which is a big fucking deal, because not a lot of people do that. Samoa Joe didn't do that, Austin Aries, Bobby Roode, Shinsuke Nakamura, Drew McIntyre, Aleister Black, they all report to NXT first. So for Mike Bennett to go straight to SmackDown is a big deal, which means they must see a lot in the guy, as they should. He has a lot of potential. But again, what I'm trying to say is that if he went to WWE straight out of Ring of Honor as a solo act without Matt Taven as a tag team, he would have floundered just because he was really nothing special. But the Miracle character in TNA really rejuvenated his career. I mean, granted, they did absolutely nothing with the guy in the second half of his tenure there. But for the first half, he was pushed. It's a pretty big fucking deal. I mean, him and McIntyre, the feud that they had, the feud he had with EC3 was pretty good. He really came into his own as a single star in TNA. So without that TNA run, I don't know if he would have signed with WWE as quickly as he did, or at least really at all. But I think they can go far. Bennett and Maria are a great act. And I've said it before, I tweeted it out a couple weeks ago. I think Bennett will work well in WWE as long as Maria is with him. Maria should not come back as long as... If Maria's back as like the ditzy old announcer who can't wrestle for shit in the ring, she's not a great wrestler. She's an amazing character, though. They have to come in together. As like the better than you act and the fucking Miracle shit and Maria just being a complete bitch, it's awesome. They are such a great act, and I think they can go far the same way that, Miz and Maurice have, or previously did on SmackDown. I think Miz and Maurice can be the same way on Raw. I think Mike and Maria can also be a great act on SmackDown and kind of counteract Miz and Maurice now that they're on Raw. Maybe that's a reason why they were moved to Raw, to make way for Bennett and Maria on SmackDown. I think that might be a prime reason. We'll finish up here at Scarlet1. Have you heard about the Corey in the House memes? Yes, I have. Like I said, through my roommate. He's huge in the meme world, and he introduced me to the Corey in the House memes. That show, I remember watching that show when it originally aired over 10 years ago. The only episode I really remember was the spinoff, was the crossover they did with That's So Raven. But other than that, I remember nothing about the show. It was not a good show. It was a poor excuse to continue along the That's So Raven legacy with the spinoff. The show sucked. They canceled it after 2 seasons, which I know is why it's a meme. But yeah, I have heard of the memes. I'm pretty familiar with them thanks to my roommate, who is huge into the meme culture, like I said. At E13A, also from Twitter, speaking of love triangles, what are the best and worst wrestling romance storylines that you can recall? Best obviously has to be Savage and Elizabeth, Macho Man, Randy Savage, and Miss Elizabeth. Probably the best and probably my favorite. Another really good one, I think pretty underrated, was the Jericho, Trish Stratus, Christian, Lita romance storyline that lasted a long time, had some good swerves, a lot of great matches, helped out Jericho a lot, and Christian a lot, even more so than Jericho. So that's a good, underrated one. Worst, at least in recent memory, the Alicia Fox, Noam Dar, Rich Swann thing does, again, nothing for me. Could not have cared less about that shit. Hopefully it's over now. But a couple of years ago, the Rusev and... I know Rusev and Lana are a real-life couple, but when they split them up, and Lana went with Dolph Ziggler, and Rusev went with Summer Rae, it was terrible. It was absolutely atrocious. It fucking sucked. That was terrible. Some of the worst TV I've seen in a long time. Definitely among the worst in recent memory. At Mr. Singleton 16, do you think Roman Reigns should have been built like how Batista was built into the babyface he eventually became? Yeah, I mean, I think he should have. I know Batista, we all talk about Roman Reigns, getting the push from day one. I mean, he got a main event push almost immediately. So did Batista. The guy who went from doing tag team title stuff to being in the main event of WrestleMania. And then again, the fans were a bit different 10 years ago with the fact they didn't think they could, rebel and riot as much as they did. On occasion they did, but Batista was popular though. I think the reason why people accepted Batista and not Roman Reigns was, again, obviously timing. Roman Reigns, if it wasn't for the whole Daniel Bryan thing, he might have been better off. But that was a big reason why he kind of got fucked over early on, was because of the Daniel Bryan thing and the timing surrounding that. And Batista also had a great story going with the rest of Evolution. So, yeah, I think Roman Reigns was seen as the Batista early on in the Shield days, but Royal Rumble 2015 onward was when they really fucked over Roman with the way they were pushing him and portraying him with the mic work. Batista was not cutting those bad of promos. Like, those were atrocious. Like, the Jack and the Beanstalk shit from Roman Reigns a couple of years ago was terrible. He's definitely gotten better in that respect, but he's still not the best mic worker when they're scripting shit for him. He's terrible whenever they script shit for him. Next question of his: do you see the Bayley and Sasha Banks feud being as dramatic and as soap opera-y as the Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio feud? I don't think... Well, first of all, I don't think they'll be feuding over the custody of a child. At least I would hope not. I don't think so, though, just because I don't think we'll ever reach the same drama of a feud as we did 11 years ago, or 12 years ago at this point. Wow, it's been that long, a dozen years. But it could still be a great feud. If it's personal, then yeah, but I don't think it's going to get as personal as that. Like the way that the shit that Eddie was doing and the secrets and the way that as great of a heel as he was. I mean, Sasha's a great heel too, but they can also have a great feud a la like Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. They weren't that personal, that dark of a storyline, but it was still an amazing feud for how personal they got with what they were given to work with and what they were bringing to the table too and the matches they had. I think Bayley and Sasha can have a similar feud in that respect. His last question here, and then one more question after that before we wrap it up. I need to know what makes Emma so evil. That segment she had with Dana this past week on Raw did not really help with that. I mean, she's not like a nefarious heel. Evil Emma's like super, super evil, and she's super diabolical. It's just heel Emma. That's what people call her. It's a lot more evil than what she was doing before, the whole bubbly shit, and which was great early on before they ruined it on the main roster. And it's also a lot more evil than the Emelina character they almost gave to her. But she's not, like, evil. She's just a heel. But I do agree, like, what they did with Dana on Monday just was not really... It was kind of weird. If they just let her be evil Emma, the same evil Emma that she was down in NXT, she's money. So hopefully I like the Dana Brooke feud because it makes sense, because they have history. But beyond that, hopefully they kind of play up those evil aspects of the evil Emma character going forward, so she doesn't become another woman on the roster like she has been the last 2 weeks. I'm glad she's even on TV at all. Like, I'm not complaining, but yeah, that segment on Raw was just kind of whatever. And then final question here from @VincentLSR. Do you see Sami Zayn becoming the WWE Champion now that he's on SmackDown Live? I think Sami Zayn is WWE Champion. It's not like a surefire pick, like it's going to happen. I mean, I think it definitely will happen. There's a lot better of a chance of it happening now that he's on SmackDown. Like, he was in the main event on SmackDown day 1, like last week. I know for a U.S. title shot, not a WWE title shot, but I think I could definitely see him and Owens fighting for the WWE Championship at some point. Maybe not the next year, in the next 2 years. But Sami Zayn is WWE Champion. I think a lot like Daniel Bryan. He's over. People like him. He's a great wrestler. Yeah, it's only inevitable, I would think. I think Sami Zayn is WWE Champion. Again, if he never won the WWE title, I'd be slightly surprised, but not really, just given the fact he has not won many titles in his NXT WWE tenure, in his respective stints on those brands. But I think he is, again, a lot better of a chance of it happening now that he's on SmackDown, and hopefully beating Kevin Owens for it would be just poetic justice. And that does it, guys, for #AskGSM here today for episode 177, April 19th, 2017. Graham GSM Matthews here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Your support is amazingly appreciated, as always. If you want to send in a question, tweet me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant with #AskGSM. Find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Graham.GSM.Matthews. Leave a comment on the post I usually put up on Tuesday nights, if not the wall itself. And also drop a comment on this very video in the comment section down below. I'll include your question in next week's edition. So with all that being said, guys, enjoy the rest of your week. Again, I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.